This is the portfolio that got me into both Harvard and UC Berkeley, one for design engineering, one for Masters of Design. And I'm coming from an architectural background. So if you're interested in figuring out how to translate architectural thinking into something more tangible and applicable to other design fields, then this is probably the one video you'll need to watch. Because the typical architecture portfolio, I'm not gonna lie, it's starting to converge where if you search up architecture portfolio on Pinterest or just even just aesthetics that people gravitate to, it's all starting to converge to a point where everything looks the same. And a good architectural portfolio is really focused on aesthetics, whereas in design engineering, we're more focused on what does this project actually achieve, what are the skills required or developed to achieve it, and then what impact does it make in a very tangible form beyond architectural concept and architectural intent. That's just something that never clicked with me because a lot of architecture projects seem so disconnected from the real world. And so what you'll see me do is actually rework some of my projects to have tangible outputs and impact beyond theory and concept and philosophy, which again, quite frankly, I think is a waste of time. But that is what architecture school rewards. So we have to balance doing really good in school and also having a portfolio that can be translated into other design fields. And so my philosophy basically throughout all my years of school is, one, I need to make projects that I'm incredibly convinced by, not the professors, not my reviewers, not my critics, but I have to be convinced by my project and has to be a project that I genuinely like working on. Because why would I do all this work just to please a prof or a reviewer? And if I do a good job at that, naturally the grades will come. And so I have a pretty damn good GPA for someone that does enough. I will never be the one to spend days and nights pushing for that last 2 to 3%. I will do what is good enough for an above average grade, and then I'll stop, and then I'll get on and live my life. And so I think that's probably advice I should tell first years. Like, when you do your projects, make sure you set your future self up for success, and you're not doing it at the expense of your current self, who is really slaving away at all of these projects. So we'll just jump straight into it. My title page is formatted with a couple goals. One is to format all of the information you typically need on a title page, but do it in a really smart way. I think formatting it here in lines of code already tells them that I am interested in tech. I'm a very technical thinker. I do understand code. So it gives them a little glimpse into my skill set beyond architecture. And then by formatting everything into a node-based design workflow, that's something I'm personally just super interested in. Like, I love node interfaces. I love thinking that way very technically in terms of each step that it takes to get towards an output. And that's the core of design engineering. You're always working on these workflows and processes that can be scaled and developed to get to an end product. We're thinking even with node-based interfaces, that's like Grasshopper, that's like Comfy UI, that's like N8N. And so at first glance, the reviewers can already tell, like, I'm really into this type of thing, and that's also what they're looking for. And then I personally don't believe in having a large table of contents. I think a table of contents is always a waste of page space because it's trying to say a lot, but in reality, it really says nothing. Like, no reviewer actually has the time to go through, like, your table of contents, flip to the page, etc., etc. They're just going to quickly scroll through your document. And so instead of having a table of contents with all of my pieces, I just give a sneak peek of each one of them here, and it aligns with one of these nodes. And so it already breaks down my exact methodology and thinking on this page. And so I'm really utilizing the cover page to make that incredibly detailed but quick and concise first impression. So then we move on to what I call my divider pages. I think these actually do have a purpose. You may think they're also like a table of contents, kind of like a waste of space, but for these, it actually really helps organize my portfolio because I have 3 very different sections, and to have that break in between clearly defines what the reviewer is looking at. And so we're starting with architecture as foundation because, of course, my background is in architecture. These are my projects from architecture school. And so I'm starting it off with what I think is most relevant because, again, we've made that very strong first impression. Now we have to carry it through. So the flow project is essentially a very workflow heavy, AI heavy, iteration heavy type of project. It is computational design, and it's an incredibly strong project in showing them a couple of things. So one is I understand how to work with computational design. Of course, I can work with Grasshopper, I can code in Python, but also I can take all of this digital media and turn it into physical media through physical prototyping. So I'm 3D printing, I'm creating this actual physical auxetic pattern. I'm achieving a physical output through all of this digital iteration with AI. And so, for example, you'll see like my entire workflow and entire design methodology and my entire process is just laid out on these pages in a very logical way for them to look at it and immediately understand how I've been able to quantify everything that I'm doing and how I am making my design decisions, especially with this table here, where I'm showing how I would judge each prompt. And especially with design engineering, like AI is such a thing, I think there should always be a project that demonstrates how you're critically using AI and implementing it in workflows that are very centered on human in the loop and with human agency. And so that's all I did with this project, really. And I just showed them kind of snippets of what I've done, the whole iteration process, and then the final tangible outputs. And so again, we have success metrics. We're showing more process than final output, and that's incredibly important. Next up is a very traditional architectural project. However, this one is really interesting because in school, our studio was on affordable housing. And although affordable housing is great for the world, in a portfolio, it's gonna look like shit. Because what does affordable housing teach in terms of a design engineering perspective? And nothing aligns. Like, affordable housing as a project does not really align with anything that a design engineering process would look for. Maybe if you really focus on like the value engineering aspect of it, or focusing on like human experience, but there are a lot more projects that would be stronger in demonstrating each of those things than an affordable housing project. Also, it just looks like shit because affordable housing, you can't do anything crazy with it. And to be quite honest, in these types of portfolios, there's still a part of it that's style over substance, and so you need to make good projects, especially for reviewers that may not come from a background in architecture. They need to look at a building and think, that's a damn cool building, and not, that looks like a building that could be built a block away from where I am, and it looks incredibly realistic, and now I'm just bored because I've already seen something like it. So this project actually looked like this beforehand, and I was like, okay, I just have to completely redo it, but also utilize as much of the material I made as possible. And so we just ended up with this project here, and I've converted what essentially was 3 very boring high-rise towers into a really cool layered type of structure. One high-rise tower, we have a mid-rise tower. It still worked with exactly what the original project was doing, which was a whole urban planning scene. I have all my group members listed there, but I've changed it into becoming a practice and an exercise in dimensional thinking. So you can see here that this project is rooted in thinking about the individual, zero-dimensional, like you are this one singularity, you are this one individual, and then it goes up in dimensions, whereas the first dimension is your linear relations with the scene. The second dimension is now we're thinking about plazas and green space and everything on a planar level. The third dimension is a spatial and vertical relationship. And then the fourth is the temporal urban rhythm. So this starts to get into like the more concept-based thinking when it comes to design, but they'll also eat this up. So again, fourth dimension is the temporal, the urban rhythm, and then the fifth dimension is perception and relative experience. You can see like the cutoff line between what is very realistic versus what is very conceptual is also just true to real life because we don't think beyond 3D. And so this is what I basically massaged this project into. And a little right up here, it's no longer an affordable housing project. It doesn't need to be. Like, that societal part of it really just contributes nothing. What does contribute is all the work I did in terms of thinking about materials and process and ecology, essentially. So 2 very strong mappings of how I've sourced materials, etc. Again, diagrams play a huge role in these types of portfolios because it shows exactly your design thinking. It shows exactly the process that you're taking to get from point A to point B. And so something like this is just incredibly strong. Details, architectural details, although they be strong in an architectural project, an architectural portfolio, they do nothing here. I just had it here because I did the work. I might as well show that I understand the technicalities behind what I'm doing. But really, out of everything, this page is probably the least useful page of this project. Then this is one of my other architectural projects. I've actually redone this. So this is what I submitted during school. This was a group project. But when the school term was over, what I actually did was completely redo the facade strategy and tailor it towards some awards. I won an award, so I think the work paid off. So I have to update it in my portfolio. But when I had this on hand and I just didn't have the time to redo it, I still distilled it down into what's the strength of this project? Like really thinking, what does it show? And it really shows, one, the scale at which you start to think about form and spatial experience from an urban level. So this is a very urban-based project. But also, I think the strongest panel is this panel where I have this glazing matrix. And so it plays into my strengths of what I'm already showing in this portfolio, which is the technical thinking, which is the very data-based type of design. And so I think this diagram actually carried the entire project, really, in terms of breaking it down into quantifiable metrics in order to reach a specific goal. Then we have design as interaction, and so everything in this section I did on my own time, and it's gotten me into like a lot of actually interesting opportunities. So the first thing is my keyboard. Now, I'm taking a Master's of Design at Berkeley. I rejected Harvard. Really, the tuition is just way too expensive for Harvard. And I also got the top funding package for Berkeley, which is 3 different types of funding, actually. I think it's 2 awards and then 1 other type of funding. I actually need to double check, so you'll see it up here on the screen. But basically, yeah, I got the highest level of funding you could get in the program, so that's why I'm going to Berkeley. But point saying, I'm going there for an MDes. Now, typically, if I stayed in Canada and I went to, for example, the University of Toronto for an MDes, I'd probably never do it because on paper, the Master of Design is a fucking useless degree. Like, what do you do with a Master of Design? Why not specialize in an area of design? Like, I would just do my Master's of Architecture, really, if I had to stay in Canada. But because it's Berkeley, I have full access to the tech scene, and doing an MDes in Berkeley means I can really tailor my entire education towards my pivot into tech. I might not have been able to do that if I stayed in Canada because we have no tech scene here. And so, by combining my hobbies with my goals, my hobbies being, in the moment, it was office ergonomics. Like, how do I maximize the ergonomics of the tools I use every day, which is my mouse and my keyboard, and also start building it from scratch and really understanding what goes into the hardware. And so this is a keyboard I made myself. You can see all my layers here. So it's all 3D printed. I learned KiCad, I learned the schematics, I learned to basically route everything, and learned just basically how components work and the hardware side of things. And it's not an incredibly sophisticated project, but it demonstrates a level of understanding that is already beyond what an applicant who only has the intention of pivoting would display. I'm already saying, hey, I'm interested in this, so I'm going to do this. I'm going to show you that I can already do this. Anyways, little blurb here. These diagrams are really kind of explaining just the why. Like, why am I even doing this? And we have stats here, so again, quantifying the metrics that I'm trying to display. And then this page, it's a little rough, I would say. Like, graphically, this is not a great page, and it's because I was traveling, I was trying to source things from everywhere. but it breaks down exactly what my process is, and I think they actually quite enjoyed this page. So it goes from preliminary sketches into the first trace, into the iterations, into the actual syntax of ergogen, and again, this is hyper specific to the project, but it shows now that I'm thinking in some sort of syntax, some sort of code. Then we go into KiCad again, and that's diving into the actual software. Then we're getting in physical about it. I'm optimizing my print quality and stuff, and then we're starting to build it. And so just showing the entire process along the way. The next project is the mouse. Of course, if I'm gonna make a fucking cool keyboard, I might as well make a fucking cool mouse. And all of this aligns with my design philosophy, right? Like, all of these have their own blurb that is really talking about why I'm doing it. This one also has a diagram, like I'm optimizing for things. Optimization is one of my keywords that I've used throughout this entire portfolio, and I think they really do like it because a lot of design engineering is optimizing for the right outputs. But also, little life hack is if you have these projects on you, this is not my keyboard I designed, this is actually the totem. I bring this around whenever I travel just because it's a little more smaller of a form factor and robust compared to my design, which I constantly iterate. But just having these available to pull out and talk about during the interviews adds so many points because although they see it on the screen, when you bring it up in front of the camera, they see the real tangible thing. And then you guys can start having a conversation about it. So that's what happened during my interviews. Like, I would always pull these things out and we just get into a super involved discussion about it, me and the interviewer. So anyways, that's the little trick there. But with this one, it really shows, so iterations, it shows the way I'm thinking about ergonomics here, it shows all the different parts. This is more of like a typical product design type of exploded axo. I mean, if you're in architecture school, you know how to do exploded axo, so why not make everything an exploded axo if applicable. Here I'm showing the contact points, etc., etc. And then this is also a really janky page, but it shows the process. And you can see, this is literally a Rhino screenshot, and I just put text on it in Illustrator at the end. But yeah, I think especially for this one, and we're showing like the process, the faults of it, the actual difference in the start versus the end product. And also for this one, because I uploaded it online, I made it open source, I got a lot of good feedback from the community. And this is also something I think the review panelists are really interested in because they want to see that you've made all these cool projects, take it a step further and actually impact the community with these projects. And so yeah, this mouse actually made quite a bit of traction on Reddit and also on Printables. I think I uploaded it to Thingiverse as well, but I took it down from Thingiverse because their platform was kind of iffy. So anyways, it made some traction. I got reviews. All's good. This project is fully diagrammatic. So this is the only page of this project. And this is a thin client AI concept. Essentially, this was actually from when I interviewed at Nothing and I got to visit their office in London. Really, really cool projects, really cool team. We had really great discussions about the future of mobile phones, mobile devices in general, of technology, how AI is starting to impact it. And although I didn't end up working there at the end, we basically collaborated and worked on this sequence of diagrams, is what I'm going to call it. But these are basically workflows and ideations of how a thin client would work, and then how it would connect to the AI service, and also a use case of it. So this is the use case. This is everything that goes in the back of that. I called it the Alfred protocol because one day I want to be rich like Bruce Wayne, and one day I want to have an Alfred of my own. That Alfred will most likely be an AI. I'm actually working on making Alfred an app right now to help with my personal productivity. I don't know if I'll launch it because I'm just one person, but this entire thing just got me super excited, and I'm going to keep exploring some of these. And then at the very end, I have work as impact. So you'll see these are blurred out because some of these are under non-disclosure. This is work that I've done throughout my 2 years working in architecture during my co-op program. And these are not just, hey, I did this at work, so I'm going to put it on the page. This is, I did this at work differently than what someone typically would do for this type of project. So for example, one of the projects in here talks all about computational design, which people do, but adding on top of that, this being one of the first projects that the firm has used AI in terms of using AI as a coding assistant, especially for Python nodes in Grasshopper, to generate a really complex matrix of a facade that really was bottlenecking the project. And so I talked about the story of how I showed up. There was this project that was being delayed because the architectural technician who was working on the Grasshopper scripts went on mat leave. You have someone who knows their script inside out, all of a sudden they're gone. Nobody else knows how to do Grasshopper in the way they did it. I think if you work in Grasshopper, you would know, like, someone work on a script, and if you get someone else to look at it, you will need some time to really process what the person does, because everyone works in Grasshopper a little bit differently. And so they had this jumble of scripts on their hands that nobody knew how to work. And so what I did was actually reverse engineered the whole thing, and I took a bunch of different scripts, consolidated it into one single script, optimized it with some custom JH Python nodes, and then took it a step further and added more design intent and control in the actual script. And again, that was the first time the firm implemented AI directly in a project, beyond using chatbots and LLMs to just write project descriptions. This was actually a more involved process, and I did all of that as an intern. Like, I talked about how I took on that responsibility, how it was literally just me making all of these design decisions and making the final facade. And like, at the end of the day, what I generated and worked alongside the partner with, because of course he has to give the thumbs up or thumbs down, but like, what I made was what they sent out for pre-construction, which is really cool. Like, I'm gonna be able to stand in front of that building one day and look at this super cool, awesome facade and be like, hey, yeah, I did that. And the rest of the projects all follow kind of the same line. So it's either tasks that I'm given and I find a way to do it better than traditionally how you would do it, or I seek out a task that I'm personally just really interested in and I advocate for myself to do that for the team. And so work as impact is really demonstrating just that professional side of things and really demonstrate how I communicate and collaborate and work as a designer. And so I think that is something invaluable that architecture school might give you the opportunity to do, it might not. And this is why I always tell people, if you're going to go into a program, go into a co-op program, because at the end of the day, the architectural industry, academically, it's a lot of fluff, and so you should actually go work and figure out what is it that actually makes tangible difference beyond academia and concept and just all the fluff that I'm not interested in. Anyways, I end off with a back cover, and it really is just a minimal call to the front cover where I had that one node of code that was just preliminary information. This just tells them website, LinkedIn, YouTube, emails, and that's about it. I'm going to blur that out because you guys can email me through my YouTube email if you want to get in touch. But yeah, so that is really my portfolio. And I will say, during the application process, the portfolio is not the heavy lifter. A lot of it relies on your letters of recommendation. It relies on your statements of purpose. And so everything you write has to be displayed within your portfolio. You can write with a lot of conviction, and then your portfolio will suck ass, and then of course you're not going to get in. So you have to make sure that the two things really work interchangeably and play off the strengths of each other. For the letters of recommendation, I was incredibly fortunate to have identified early on that I want to leave architecture. And so I got in contact with the right people in the right places and have them vouch for me. And Harvard specifically, as a school, they are based on that legacy system where if you get a recommendation from an alum, they do take that into consideration. There's literally a box that you check to say if this person is a Harvard alum or not. So I made sure to get one. And then in terms of the letters that everyone else writes you, you can't blindly trust people to write you good letters of recommendation. Like, everyone has their lives to go about, and you're just one student, and they've probably taught like a bajillion other students, and so you're just like this one student that they will remember, but they're not going to be invested in you. No matter how invested you think they are in you, they're never going to be fully invested in you. And so when people write you letters, don't expect them to know your story and be able to vouch for you 100%. You need to tell them what you want them to write. You literally need to write the letter yourself, maybe in a template format, send it to them so they can put it in complete sentences and then sign off. Because these letters of recommendation have to go, again, in hand with your SOPs. Your SOPs has to go with your portfolio. Everything needs to work interchangeably pretty perfectly in order for you to have that really strong application. If there is even like the slightest mismatch, then your chances are just going to go down because of all the applicants applying. There's always going to be someone better than you. Like, this is probably not the best portfolio ever, but because I was able to have it work so well with the rest of my application materials, I think that's really where I succeeded in. And so yeah, at the end of the day, be really critical in your thinking about how to go about things like this. It's not all just pretty drawings and it's not all just very convincing words. Everything has to match together. And so yeah, hopefully this helps some of you who are thinking about either pivoting from architecture into design engineering or just restructuring your architecture portfolio to open up multiple doors and opportunities. Like, when I was working on this, during the process of it, I just took a snapshot and I applied to nothing, and I was able to hear back and be able to visit their office and go through some rounds of interviews. And I definitely would have never gone there if I just had a boring ass architectural portfolio on hand, because why would tech bros care about that, right? And so it's a constant work in progress, and everything here I've also uploaded onto my website that I'm working on. And so always put yourself out there. People like to gatekeep their portfolios. I think that is the worst thing you can do, because your portfolio is what connects for you, is what speaks for you. Your portfolio is your work that you need to show people so that they can show other people, and then eventually the right person will come along and they'll see it and they'll want to hire you or employ you or just provide you some sort of a really valuable opportunity. Anyways, that's enough yapping for today. Yeah, I'll catch you guys in my next videos, and I'll also be detailing how my design engineering journey is going. So if you're interested in that, subscribe, follow along. Other than that, peace.